This video screencast will cover the most important techniques of week 1. In week 1 we learn how to use the drawing tools in Flash, and I have a little overview on the right. I'm going to start off the same as you had to, so import an image which we're going to trace. I select the layer on which I want to import the image, and I go to File, Import, Import to Stage. In case you select a locked layer, you see you can't select Import to Stage, so you need to select a layer which is not locked. File, Import, Import to Stage, Command R or Control R of Windows. You navigate to the location of the image you want to trace. I'm going to trace Marge Simpson. And this is a file format which supports transparency, so you can see through a part of the image. The background is missing, is transparent. Marge appears to be way too big for my current settings of the stage, so I could change the size of the stage, but in this case I'm going to change the size of Marge. I can do this by pressing Q, which is the free transform tool. You also have a transform window, so here I can just grab this value and scale down Marge. Now you can see that I'm only scaling in the horizontal direction. I don't want this, so I can click this chain, and now those two dimensions are hooked to each other. So if I change one, I will also change the other. So I'm going to manually change it to 25%, and I'm going to grab my image and bring it up by clicking and dragging. So now my illustration is positioned. I'll make it a little larger. I'm going to be focusing on the top part. Okay, my reference image is in place, so I'm going to lock this layer so I can't by accident change it. So let's move on. Pen tool, shortcut P. This is a very important tool, and this tool gives you a lot of control. So if you're going to draw curved lines, which are quite steady, it's preferred to use the pen tool. If you take a look at the hair of Marge, there's a repeating pattern, which are short arcs. I would use the pencil tool, which we see later. So, but for parts like the arm here, I think the pen tool is the best tool to choose. So making sure that I'm on another layer, my reference image is locked. I don't want to draw on the reference image. So how do you use the pen tool? If you single click, you add a point. And this is a linear point. So if I click again, you can see a straight line. If you click and drag, you start a Bezier line. You can change the handlers. So if I click and drag again, the line starts in a curve. So of course I have to drag in the direction which I'm going to draw. So clicking and dragging gives you a Bezier point. I'm going to change the color in which I'm drawing, because otherwise I won't see my result. So I'm going to click on the color stopwatch, the color swatch, and select something which I can see above my black lines. So I'm going to select a blue, and if I now click and drag, if I release, you can see that we clearly can see the line we have just drawn. You need to exercise how much points you use and how much tension you put inside of the different points. This is something you learn as you go along. I'm going to put the curve here. Now the problem is, when I want to continue drawing and go straight to this point, if I click and drag, you can see there's a little curve at the end of this point, because there's a Bezier handler on this side. So to remove this Bezier handler, I can do two things. If I finish drawing the point, I can single click on the point, and this will remove the last handler. So now I can continue drawing like this. I'm going to end here. This is the same situation. I want to start off in this direction after I finish this point. And the second technique is to press the Alt key while I'm dragging. So I'm now still dragging the point and I have the Alt key pressed. So now I can position this second handler, so I can make it a little smaller and point it in the direction which I will be drawing. Now I first release the mouse and then the Alt key. So now we have a handler is pointing in this direction and I can continue drawing like this. So two techniques to remove or to manipulate the handlers. Use them both so you get used on to using them, sorry. So I'm going to continue drawing a little bit. How you do this you can choose yourself, but I in most cases just go around the figure and draw the outlines, so the outer lines of the character, and then mostly I come back to enter the extra lines inside of the figure. Sometimes you need to zoom out to see the structure. Here's a, I'm going to continue up like this. Okay, here I can use the trick again on single clicking it. Come up to here, that's not so good. Okay, now an easy shortcut to remember is a deselect all. So a select all is Control A on Windows or Command A on Mac. If you add the shift to it, it's a deselect. So Command Shift A in my case will deselect the lines. This can come in quite handy because now I can start drawing somewhere else. And if you don't deselect, your line will be drawn from the last point you clicked. Now a very unique thing you can do in Flash is start drawing from a point on a line. So if I select this line with the sub-selection tool, shortcut A, you will see that there's a control point here and here. And in software like Illustrator, you can't start drawing from this. You will draw a new line. They will not be connected. But in Flash, you can. The problem is if the line is selected and you come in the neighborhood of a point, your cursor changes. When you have the pen tool, you will get a minus sign next to the pen, indicating that if you click, you will remove this point. Of course, we don't want this. We want to start drawing from here. So you need to deselect. Command Shift A, Control Shift A. If I now hover over the point, you can see that my cursor changes to a straight line under an angle, like a 45 angle. This indicates that if you click here, you can continue drawing this line. So I'm single clicking, and now I can click and drag to continue from this point. So this is a very unique thing which you can do in Flash. So this way we can continue drawing from an existing line or point. Another thing you might have noticed, from the moment two strokes, so two lines touch each other, they're united. So if I clicked here, you can see we get now one complete line. This also is a very unique property of drawing in Flash, because you can use it in your advantage. If I would draw a line like this, you can see that these lines are divided, and you could, if you want to, just remove segments of it without doing things like a divide, which you would use in Illustrator. So sometimes this is quite handy to section certain parts of your drawing. Okay, so this is the pen tool, shortcut P. Make sure you learn to use it. Second thing I have on my list is the convert anchor point tool. This you can use to convert points. If I single click, single click, single click, you have a straight line, two straight lines. So you could call this point a linear point, so it's a linear line, there's no curves. If I want to change this, I press C, convert anchor point tool. If I now click and drag, you can add handlers to the point. It also works in the other directions, like a toggle. If there is a point containing a Bezier and you single click on it, you transform it back to a linear point. So the convert anchor point tool might come in handy from time to time. Then we use the pen tool for situations where we needed a lot of control. We can use the pencil tool if you want to draw by hand. I have a drawing tablet, so I'm going to use this shortcut Y. And very important about the pencil tool is the pencil mode. If you select it in the property bar, in the toolbar, you can see these two properties or options. If you open the pencil mode, you can see there are three modes: straighten, smooth, and ink. Now the straighten will try to change lines you draw into straight lines. So for instance, if I try to draw a square, Flash will understand that I'm trying to do this, and he will straighten out these lines. So this is handy if you are drawing a staircase like this. Then Flash will try to straighten all the lines. But in most cases, if you're drawing stuff like March, this is not so handy. So you need to make sure that you select the right pencil mode. Now in smooth, Flash will correct the lines and make them a little bit simpler, removing some points and making curves out of the things you drawn. The ink mode tries to exactly mimic what you're doing. So there's a little smoothing going on, but not that much as the other pencil mode. So if I want to use this on March, I will probably use the smooth pencil mode, because I want to even out the little errors I add while drawing. So as you can see, once I release, Flash corrects a few parts, and this is sometimes has a disadvantage, because now here Flash turned this into a curve and I want it to be a little bit more straight. So sometimes it needs some extra manual correction or trying it again, just to make the curve a little more explicit, like this. Okay, you can see that I did a better job the second time I drew it. So, and again, if two lines touch, they are merged together like this. So they merge together because I'm in merge drawing. Very important concept in Flash. You have this symbol here. If you click it, it's toggled, so now it's pressed down. Now you're in object drawing. If I now draw two lines, you can see that once I release the mouse or the pen, that a blue rectangle is added to it, indicating that this is now a separate object. So I could move this line, and the problem is that these are two separate objects. So if I now use the paint bucket, I cannot fill the opening in between the section of these two lines. So I don't find it that handy. Some people like the object drawing, but most of the time I use merge drawing, because this way, if you overlap lines, you can immediately fill intersections. So object and merge drawing, keep in mind that you have the correct mode selected. So the pencil tool, remember the pencil modes, select the best mode for the job you're doing. You can see that there is less control as the pen tool, but for organic shapes this is much quicker and easier than using the pen tool. Okay. So these tools the pen tool, pencil tool, all generate strokes. So lines which you can select, of which you can change the width and the color. The tool we will be looking at next is the brush tool, and this tool will generate fills. So if you draw a line with a brush, you won't be able to change the thickness of the line. I will show you. So B for brush. You can select the brush size. If I now draw something and select it, you see that it's a shape, a fill. You have no stroke properties here. You can only have the fill color, which you can change. So it's a different concept. I'm gonna continue my drawing a little, so I have some closed shapes to show you what's next. I'm not going to do that very accurate, but just enough to show you. This is really horrible, but just for the sake of the exercise, it will have to do. Okay. So let's say I finished drawing the outlines. There's no fills yet, so this is a nice time to select everything and make my lines black. If you double click on a line, you will select all the other lines that are touching. So if I now shift click on a line on the head, you will see that I continue selecting. But in this case, if there's nothing else, I can just click on the name of the layer, and I will select everything on it. So if I now go to the stroke color, I can change them all to black in one action. I could also change the thickness of the lines if I would want to. 1.5 for instance. If I now hide my reference image, you can see that all strokes now are black. So now I want to start fill in March. For this I'm going to make a copy of my reference image. And a good trick to remember is paste in place. So edit, paste in place, it's the same as a normal paste, but you include the shift button. So Command Shift V or Control Shift V will copy March in exact the same spot. So I could now select her and move her a little to the side, because I want to use her as a reference to color in my image. So how do I start at this? I could use the eyedropper to select the color. And I could now click inside the head of March. The problem is that sometimes there are little gaps, because I drew this by hand. On some places the lines may not be touching each other or overlapping. So that's why they included this little menu inside of the bucket tool. You can choose to close gaps. So I'm going to start off with close small gaps, and this was already enough. So I'm going to use the eyedropper to pick a color and very quickly fill in, because we're talking about the brush tool, and I want to show you some interesting thing you can do with the brush tool. So by default you have a fill color for your brush, and you can start drawing. Now there's something very strange going on with the brush size. In most software, like in Photoshop, you select a certain size of brush, for instance 5 pixels, and if you zoom in on an image, your brush is getting bigger because it stays relative and absolute to the zoom view. So if you're looking at 100%, you see a circle of 5 pixels big, but if you zoom in to 200%, the size doubles. Now this doesn't happen in Flash. So now I'm in 200%. If I zoom in and I'm using the same brush, I'm drawing at half the size as I was, because the brush size stays absolute to the view. So it stays absolute, so it doesn't change. So if I zoom in again and draw another line, you can see that the brush appears to be getting thinner and thinner. So this is strange behavior. If you want to draw a figure not using pen tool or pencil tool, but a brush tool, you need to remember in which percentage of view you're in, and you need to remember which brush size you're using. So once you select something from here and select a certain zoom, you have to remember this in order to always have the same style. So this is strange, but yeah, it might sometimes come in handy. With the brush tool, you can toggle some options, use pressure. This will mean if you have a drawing tablet that you can use the pressure of the pen pushing down on the drawing board. Of course, if you're drawing in certain styles where the line thickness vary, this might be handy. If you look at the original of March, there's also a little bit difference in the beginning and the ending and the curves of the lines, so you could use a brush to draw this, but I would advise you to first start off with tools that generate strokes. So that's one thing about brush. The size, there's something strange going on. It just stays the same no matter what the zoom is, so keep this in mind. But what I wanted to show you is the fact that you have brush modes. These are very important. These are different ways on how to use the brush tool. The paint normal, quite obvious, does what you expect it to do. If you draw over everything. So these strokes are cut out, and I'm drawing inside the fills. This is good if you're drawing over something, so something needs to come in front of something else. But most of the time you will be enhancing a drawing and you will need the other modes. Paint fills, this will not influence the strokes. So if I paint everywhere, but the strokes remain untouched. Then we have the paint behind, which is quite handy if you want to, for instance, continue drawing here without using strokes. So if I would want to draw in her neck, once I release the mouse, you can see that the fill just jumps behind the strokes. So paint behind, once you release, the thing you just painted is moved to the back. So also if you would paint here, you can see that the thing you painted here is moved to the back. Then you have paint selection, which is my favorite. Let's say that I wanted to draw the darker side on March head. I pick the color, I select the part I want to paint, get to the brush tool, shortcut B, and select paint selection. What I can now do is start from up here and start painting the same curves like this, for instance. If I now release, you can see that only the selected fill is modified. So if I paint inside the yellow here, nothing happens, only the part that is inside the selection will stay. This is very handy to draw a highlight like this or a dark side. You can just by hand draw and only the fill will be affected. And then we have paint inside, which does something that's comparable to the paint selection, only it's the point where you start drawing determines the fill you will influence. So if I start drawing inside this yellow part and I go through the blue, you can see that only the yellow is influenced, so this part. If I start drawing inside of the blue and go through the face, you can see that only this top is influenced. This is because I started painting here. Now this is not the same as paint selection, because if I start drawing outside and go like this, I only have the part that is outside my drawing. So I can't start from the outside, I need to start from the inside. Sometimes this is possible, like here, if I want to make this a little larger, I can do it this way. But if I want to start drawing from outside and come in with a curve like this, this brush mode is not so handy. You also have a use tilt option. So if you're drawing with a tablet, this might come in handy too. Sometimes you have to experiment with it. I think the pressure is the most important feature you can use. So brush and brush modes, remember to learn this very well, because I find them very important, very useful. If you switch to the eraser tool, shortcut E, you will find these brush modes translated to the eraser. So erase normal, erase fills, lines, erase selected fills, and erase inside. So I think you can guess what this does. Erase normal is erasing everything. Erase fills will only influence fills. Erase lines will only erase lines. Erase selected fills. If I select these fills and I press the eraser, I can only influence the selected fills. And then erase inside. If I start clicking here and dragging, I will only erase inside of this fill. If I start in this yellow part, I will only erase inside of this part. So once you understand the brush modes, I think you will understand the eraser modes. Here's a strange thing, the faucet tool. If you use this, you can remove a complete fill. Quite useless, but I might ask it during the exam. Okay, you already saw me using the eyedropper tool. Now, a thing most students don't realize is that it works for both fills as strokes. So if I move over my drawing, when I'm over the fill, you can see a filled square next to the eyedropper. If I move towards a stroke, you can see it changing. So the little square is no longer filled, but the outlines are visible. So this is indicating that if I would click now, I'm copying the stroke style. If I click here, I'm copying the fill style. So, and depending on what you choose, the next tool is automatically selected. So if I click on a fill, I get the paint bucket tool. So I could use this to fill some other parts. If I click on a stroke, I get the ink bottle tool, which could help me changing the style of a line. Let's for instance say that I didn't change this part, it was still in my reference color. I could use the eyedropper to copy the style and then apply it to lines. If you have a selection, double clicking on a line selects the complete line. You can also use the eyedropper. If I now click on a stroke, these settings are immediately applied to the selected strokes. Same for fills. If I use this, select this fill, use the eyedropper and click on a color, it is automatically applied to the selection. So the eyedropper works contextually. If you have something selected, it will be applied. If you don't have something selected, you will get the paint bottle tool or the ink bottle tool. This can speed up your efficiency. So paint bucket is for fills, ink bottle is for strokes. It's why they chose the S as a shortcut. So if I press S, you get the ink bottle tool. You can select a certain stroke color and size, and you can now just click on a stroke to change its property, its style. So these are very important things which we saw in lesson 1. My advice is to practice a lot, download some different styles of cartoons or illustrations and try to trace and fill them in. You will learn a lot by doing that.